To kick this thing off, I've chosen a film from, in my humble opinion, one of the greatest living American directors. Never mind, he also happens to be my personal favorite. That man is David Lynch. Mulholland Drive was the first Lynch film that I ever saw, and let me tell you, nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to experience. All of the movies that I had seen up to this point in my life are what you could consider normal movies. I remember watching it with a friend, and as the credits rolled, we just looked at each other in shock. What did we just watch? On the surface, and surely after one viewing, knowing nothing about it, it can appear quite impenetrable and perhaps even frustrating, especially if you're not into metaphors, surrealism, absurdity, Lynch trademarks. Luckily, as I have found, those are all some of my favorite things in movies. Warning, spoilers ahead. If you hate spoilers as much as I do, I would recommend watching this movie before venturing any further in this video, because there's gonna be a ton of spoilers. If you don't mind spoilers, full steam ahead. Just consider yourself warned. Anyway, I definitely needed to watch the movie again to begin to unravel its mysteries. So I did, and it immediately made more sense to me. I would even go so far as to say maybe watch the movie twice before you watch this video, but that'll cost you about 5 hours, and I know that that's no small investment of time. The first 2 hours of this movie are a dream, a fantasy born of betrayal and the dying ambitions of a failed actress. Notice in the beginning of the movie where it comes into the bedroom, the camera, and it goes into the pillow, signifying that we're basically entering a dream. Lynch does stuff like this all the time. The last 30 minutes of the movie are the reality of her situation. This structuring kind of helps explain all of the odd things that happen in this movie. The phony dialogue, the weird situations, the unexplainable phenomena. Really just the unreality of everything. It is the fantasy version. What Betty, who is actually Diane, thinks Hollywood is going to be, mixed with the delusion she creates for herself to deal with her guilt. Things like the blue key, the money in Rita's purse, Rita herself, who is actually Camilla. They all have their counterparts in Diane's reality. Put simply, the plot is this. Diane comes to Hollywood, gets some small parts with help from Camilla, falls in love with Camilla, is spurned, emotionally toyed with, and finally publicly humiliated. So she hires a hitman. The blue key is the sign that the job is done. Then she spirals into her guilt and eventually kills herself. Honestly, as confusing as it is on first viewing, the whole Club Silencio scene really lays it all out for you.
No hay banda. There is no band. Il n'est pas d'orchestre. It is an illusion.
This is also the scene where the blue box comes into play, and when combined with the blue key, we exit the fantasy. The whole thing operates on a few different levels, but I believe at its most simple, it's kind of just a commentary on Hollywood, though less so than his 2006 labyrinth of a film, Inland Empire, which is probably his least accessible, but most ambitious other than Twin Peaks: The Return. A lot of what I love about this movie is really what I love about David Lynch in general. He's very meticulous about his sound design and music, and he uses this to set a tone of tension, unease, and just a dreamy unreality. No matter how many times I watch this movie, and honestly, I've lost count at this point, the dream about the man behind Winkies is one of the most unsettling things I've ever seen in a movie.
There's a man in back of this place. He's the one who's doing it. I can see him through the wall. I can see his face. hope that I never see that face ever outside of a dream.
It's a masterwork of tension. Similarly, the opening 45 minutes of his '97 film Lost Highway, which features another false reality born from guilt, are more unsettling than most horror movies I've seen, and no one, I think even including Lynch himself, would consider his movies horror. He works in the realm of the absurd, and he adheres to his own dream logic throughout his movies. But he also finds humor in the absurd. Lynch works in both aspects, the unsettling and the humorous. When Mulholland Drive was released on DVD, it came with an insert that had 10 clues to unraveling the mystery of the movie that were actually provided by David Lynch himself. Came as kind of a surprise because Lynch is notoriously tight-lipped about offering any explanation for his movies.
Believe it or not, Eraserhead is my most spiritual film.
We'll elaborate on that.
No, I won't.
It's left up to the viewer. Of course, he has something specific in mind when he's making the film, obviously, but he doesn't want that to be the only interpretation. Personally, I think some of the clues that he provides only just lead to more confusion when trying to figure out what the movie's about. But after a viewing or two, most of them do make sense. But since the film can be experienced differently by everyone who watches it, it's kind of fitting. As far as the performances go, I think everyone involved does a great job. I love Justin Theroux as Adam Kesher, the chic director who's losing control of his film. Laura Elena Herring as the mysterious Rita and the conniving Camilla. The classic Ann Miller as the eccentric Coco. But Naomi Watts really shines through as the small-town girl who comes to Hollywood with stars in her eyes, who tragically gets chewed up and spit out by the uncaring machine of show business. And that's why I love Mulholland Drive. If you're interested in having one of the most fascinating cinematic journeys imaginable, the film is available for rental on these various streaming platforms. Thank you for joining me. If you enjoyed it, be sure to join me next time as I cover another of my favorite movies of all time. I'm Dan, and this is why I love it.